Hey, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. Happy New Year. So glad to see you all here on here. Now we'll let Miss Salvin start us off.
Hi, so we are WALC. WALC stands for the Wilderness Arts and Literacy Collaborative. And like Miss you said, I'm Miss Salvin.
And I'm Miss Urzua. And our theme this semester is where we're from, land, history, and self.
Whoa.
That means we'll be learning about the way the land is formed and shaped, both geologically by forces in nature and historically by the people who settled here.
So if you're the kind of person who's curious about how mountains are made or why San Francisco is so hilly, you will discover the answers to those questions. By the end of the semester, you should be able to look at landforms like these and figure out what forces formed and shaped them to be that way. And we're also going to be studying not just what forms and shapes the land, but also what forms and shapes us and our people. Our theme is where we're from, land, history, and self. So because we'll be learning about the different communities of people who have settled in the Bay Area and the contributions they've made to shaping California as they struggled for self-determination.
Now, as an example of how our land and our history shaped who we are, we're going to be reading Bless Mi Ultima by Rodolfo Anaya. Bless Mi Ultima is a book about a young Mexican-American boy who's struggling to understand who he is in the landscape of his Mexican-American roots, his religion, and his indigenous culture that have all formed and shaped him and who he is.
And at the end of the semester, you will examine the forces that have formed and shaped you, while drawing personal connections to the geology, history, and statistics you've studied.
This semester, you're also going to be writing an autobiographical narrative that includes geological, historical, and mathematical references as a framework for understanding an event or experience that has formed and shaped who you are today. Then you're going to be recording your narrative to create a podcast that you can share with the rest of the community.
So what we're going to do is show you some examples of autobiographical narratives that are just short clips taken from the final projects of previous WALC students in other years. You'll see that these examples we're showing you include photographs that students took during their field studies or brought from home, and we won't have the photography component during distance learning, but you will be using Soundtrap to record your stories, so you can include the kinds of sound effects and music that you will hear in these examples. So we're just going to show you a few examples so you can see what you'll be doing in terms of your self-analysis.
We walked for hours. I had scratches on my back and elbows from crawling through small, tight spaces with 5 strangers I barely remember. Helicopters flying right above our heads. We took large, quiet steps. We tried to be quiet as mice. We hiked over big mountains, steep and very rocky. At the bottom of those mountains was a desert that looked miles long, so dusty, dry, and hot. My mom was holding my baby brother as I walked next to her. With every step she took, her feet would stank into the sand.
I remembered it like it was yesterday, waiting in line outside of these big metal doors with my grandma. Then a lady in a uniform telling me, all metal items in the basket and walk through. I walked through the gates, seeing older men in jumpsuits, some chatting and some playing ball. As we got farther in, we could hear names being called. Sitting in a room full of orange, blue, and gray jumpsuits made me feel really uncomfortable.
My grandma told me that during the war in El Salvador, they had to hide the kids every night because they never knew when bombs were going to be thrown or when there were going to be gunshots. They took the kids and went to the top of the mountains. Sometimes houses were destroyed. Kids didn't want to go to school because soldiers would go to the schools and get anyone 10 or older to train them for the war. I was just a baby, but my brother was old enough to get taken, and my mom got worried. She told my grandma, who had already come to the United States, and my grandma decided with my uncle to gather up enough money to bring us here to San Francisco. We came here and lived with my grandma and uncles. We were like Sierra Nevadas, formed underground from magma cooling to become rock, then rising into mountains. The magma was the war we left behind as we rose to be in a better place.
How would you feel if your father and I got a divorce? I was only 13, but my opinion counted to her. I didn't want to be the reason she left or stayed. All I could say was, I don't know, Mom. I wanted them to be together, but I didn't want to see my mother hurting anymore. Then she asked my sister, barely 10. She said, I think you should. She didn't know any better. She was just a mama's girl. My mom turned the music up, but it didn't drown out my thoughts. As I peered through the front window, my mind replayed the question over and over again. It turned out that she already had the answer to her own question. We were driving to my grandparents' house because she was leaving my dad. It was like the Farallon plate and Pacific plate were colliding under me. After the Farallon plate had completely broken down, as it sank under the Pacific plate, it formed the magma chamber, which later rose to create the Sierra Nevadas mountains. My mother was the Farallon plate. She had been broken down, but was moving away to get herself back together, to hopefully be standing taller than the mountain one day.
Okay, so again, those were just some examples of previous student work. And hopefully you can tell from those clips that everything we teach you about nature, you will apply to yourself. Understanding the land and your history will become tools for your own self-analysis.
And even though we cannot take you on field studies to explore the land in person yet, we're gonna do our best to be able you to discover it on your own. So all WALC students are gonna get a geologist starter kit to use for class, something like this. And you'll also get some mystery lab materials that will be a secret that you cannot open until our labs happen.
Now, of course, our online Zoom classes are still going to be school. We'll have activities, assignments, discussions, reading, writing for you online every day. So you can earn your 15 credits per grading period and your 45 credits per semester. So we want to thank you all for watching our presentation. Hopefully we showed you that this semester we'll be connecting our land to our history and to you. So let me go over some things quickly. Get the summary slide up. Por favor. All right, so one more time, our theme this semester is where we're from, land, history, and self. We're reading Bless Me Ultima by Rodolfo Anaya. The product, so what you're going to complete at the end of the semester is an autobiographical narrative and then turn that into a podcast. And then the credits available is 45 plus, so 45 for the school, coming to class every day doing your work, and then there'll be some extra credit for optional field assignment. So if anybody has any questions, if you could put them in the chat and then we can respond to them. But we hope we see you in WALC. Come walk with us, as we always like to say.